Welcome back to the Broadman Word, and we are finally at the last plague in Egypt. However, we are going to take a little bit of a bonus look at the crossing of the Red Sea. It's a fantastic passage. It's so just majestic to read through. Just the power of God in that section. That I couldn't bypass that. Plus, technically, it is the immediate context to the Exodus itself, so that kind of works. But we're going to take a look at that on Thursday. But today we are going to look at the 10th plague in Egypt, and that is the death of the firstborn. It is a section that is just hard to read. It's very hard to read, and it really asks this big question: how do we combine God's justice and God's mercy, seeing all this death that happens in Egypt with the death of the firstborn. Of course, we're also going to look at what Egyptian god or goddess might be behind the last plague. And then we will look at the Exodus itself, or the action of the Israelites finally leaving Egypt. And so we will look at that today. So turn with me to Exodus chapter 12, verses 29 through 42. But we'll start in verse 29. At midnight, the Lord struck down all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh, who sat on his throne, to the firstborn of the captive who was in the dungeon, and all the firstborn of the livestock. And Pharaoh rose up in the night, he and all his servants and all the Egyptians, and there was a great cry in Egypt, for there was not a house where someone was not dead. Then he summoned Moses and Aaron by night and said, Up, go out from among my people, both you and the people of Israel, and go, serve the Lord, as you have said. Take your flocks and your herds, as you have said, and be gone, and bless me also. All right, so the 10th plague is, it's brutal. It's hard. It's hard to read and to think about. Um, a lot of the times, especially when it comes to church, we talk so much about the grace and the mercy of God, which is so true, by the way. I just want to make sure I make that clear. He is exactly those things. He is grace and he is mercy, but he's also just. He is justice. And that's what we see in this section. We see justice. Now, even within this section, there still is mercy, though. And the reason why there's mercy is because of the Passover that we talked about last time, where God gives a opportunity to be saved from the death of the firstborn, and that is to put the blood of the lamb on the doorpost. So there is an opportunity to have to experience the mercy of God in this moment. But the Egyptians do not grab that opportunity. And it might be because they just are scared of Pharaoh and they don't want to do what the Israelites are doing with their doorposts. It could be that they think it's maybe a little bit bizarre to put the blood of a lamb on the doorposts of your house. It could be many different things, but they don't take the opportunity to ask the Israelites, hey, have you heard anything from God about what is coming? And so I think that's interesting to think about. Um, and you see time and time again as the plagues go on, the Egyptians around Pharaoh start to get a little antsy. And, well, they could have said, hey, maybe we should figure out what's coming and if there's anything that we can do to protect ourselves from the plague that is coming. But they don't do that. And it's again, it's hard to read. Verse 30, for there was not a house where someone was not dead. Because of that, there was a great cry in Egypt. There's just it's hard to imagine, especially if you're a parent too. It's hard to imagine waking up and seeing your child already gone. It's just that's that's the dark that's the really dark and hard part to read in this section. But there's also other things to learn from this section too. Um, First off, it really asks that big question: how can we combine God's justice and God's mercy? Well, it's because God is 100% justice and 100% mercy. He's 100% grace. He's 100% all of his attributes. And so, in our minds, we could look at this section and go, I don't really see how this is merciful. Yeah, it may be just, but I don't know about the mercy part. Whereas you could look at this and go, well, I think it was too much justice as well. It was overdoing it. Well, again, we see in throughout all these plagues, God gives the Egyptians, not just Pharaoh, but the Egyptians, time and time again, to let Israel go, to proclaim that the God of the Hebrews is the only true God, which is why it is important to see that maybe there is spiritual warfare going behind the scenes with the God of the Hebrews versus the gods and goddesses of ancient Egypt. And so for me, I think that's how I would tackle that. And we continue to see that, by the way, in the death of Jesus. Yes, God is merciful. He sent his son. But God is also just, and he poured his wrath upon his son while he was on the cross. It's just that is what we are seeing, and that's what we believe in as followers of Jesus. And it's interesting to see that when we're talking about God being just and gracious and merciful. But the other thing, of course, that we can take a look at here is the Egyptian god or goddess behind this. Of course, some would link this to the Egyptian gods and goddesses of healing because of the death of the firstborn. I don't think that would be the focus. Instead, I think another option could be the Egyptian god Anubis, because he is the god of death, mummification, and the afterlife. He is actually kind of seen as a guide in the afterlife itself. And so I think that's possibly a more interesting connection with this plague. However, I think there's one that's even more interesting, and it's actually Pharaoh himself. So in ancient Egypt, the pharaohs were seen as divine. Now, scholars kind of debate what that would mean. Some would say that they would see Pharaoh as completely divine. Some would say that he is more seen as like an intercessor between the gods and goddesses of Egypt and the people of Egypt. And so, in a way, they are more like demigods, or what that means is they're divine, but not on the same level as the other Egyptian gods and goddesses that we have looked at as we've walked through the plagues in Egypt. Me personally, I think that's probably closer to what's going on with Pharaoh. He's more seen as like a demigod, but he is definitely still seen as superior to other just mortal men. And so for me though, I think that is possibly who's behind this last plague. And why do I think that? Well, it's because of the description of who passed in verse 29. You have kind of a general description of the firstborn of the captive who was in the dungeon and all the firstborn of the livestock. And then you have the mention of there was not a house where someone was not dead. You have these general statements. But before all those, you have a phrase of very specific mention. And that is in verse 29, from the firstborn of Pharaoh who sat on his throne. Now, some could say it's just showing that it didn't matter if you had wealth and status or if you didn't, your firstborn died. And that's definitely true. Don't get me wrong. That absolutely did happen because they did not take the blood of the lamb and put it on the doorpost. And so, therefore, their house was not passed over, so to speak. But for me, I think it really shows that God is trying, the God of the Hebrews, is trying to make this grand proclamation that Pharaoh is not God. And neither are any of your Egyptian gods or goddesses. I, being the Lord, are, he is the only true God. I think that is the main statement with the 10th plague in Egypt. Again, hard to read, hard to think about, but I think that's what's going on when it comes to why the 10th plague happened in the way that it did. But then after that, okay, you finally have Pharaoh go with no conditions, by the way, just go. Get out. Like that's he basically said get out. And really the people kind of said so too, not just with their words, but their actions. So let's look at verses 33 through 42. The Egyptians were urgent with the people to send them out of the land in haste, for they said, "We shall all be dead," which honestly is probably not far fetched because of all of the destruction that they've seen with these 10 plagues. So I totally understand where they're coming from. Verse 34. So the people took their dough before it was leavened, their netting bowls being bound up in their cloaks on their shoulders. The people of Israel had also done as Moses told them, for they had asked the Egyptians for silver and gold jewelry and for clothing, and the Lord had given the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, so that they let them have what they asked. Thus, they plundered the Egyptians. You just have this moment of not only are they free, but they literally are given a fresh start with this bonus income because the people of Egypt just want them to leave. It's somewhat humorous. It's not, but it's kind of humorous. It's just like, okay, please take my earrings, take my golden rings, and get out. Like that's kind of what you're seeing here. But that's kind of what's going on. Verse 37. And the people of Israel journeyed from Ramesses to Succoth, about 600,000 men on foot, besides women and children. A massive group of people. A mixed multitude also went up with them, and very much livestock, both flocks and herds. And they baked unleavened cakes of the dough that they had brought out of Egypt, for it was not leavened, because they were thrust out of Egypt, and could not wait, nor had they prepared any provisions for themselves, which goes back, of course, to the instructions with Passover that we looked at last time. Verse 40. The time that the people of Israel lived in Egypt was 430 years. At the end of 430 years, on that very day, all the hosts of the Lord went out from the land of Egypt. It was a night of watching by the Lord to bring them out of the land of Egypt. So this same night was a night of watching kept to the Lord by all the people of Israel throughout their generations. I mean, what just excitement / nerves must have been there now that they're finally leaving Egypt and finally living slavery as well. But then you have this great, I think, just what a great line in verse 42. It was a night of watching by the Lord to bring them out of the land of Egypt. So it's not like God orchestrated everything with the plagues, but then as soon as the proclamation by Pharaoh is given, the Lord says, okay, Moses and Aaron, you can take over and lead the people out on your own, and they'll just follow you. No, the Lord is still in control, even of the steps that they take as they leave Egypt. I mean, just what a beautiful line, and just something that I think is great to remember as we are going through life. Every step that we take, God knows exactly. He is watching over us, and it's just a great reminder that we can also always turn to Him in prayer, no matter when or the circumstance. I think that's a beautiful thing to see. But thank you for spending a little bit of time with me today as we looked at the last plague in Egypt. Even though it was sad and dark to walk through, there are some really interesting things that we can learn about God being a God of justice and a God of grace and mercy as well. And so it's just, I think that's really interesting to see. But I appreciate you spending time with me today. We will look at the crossing of the Red Sea as we wrap up our time with the plagues in Egypt on Thursday. And so I will see you then. Thanks.